Hello, good evening everyone, and welcome to Ovale's Winter Warmer Festival. We've turned down the lights and made it nice and warm and intimate for another lineup of poets. So I'm going to introduce the poets now. First up we will have Yairen Jerez Columbié. We'll then have Forrest Gander, who's joining us via Zoom behind me. And finally, we'll have Catherine Foley. So we'll get started right away and get on with the show. So Yairen will be up first. Yairen Jerez Columbié grew up in Havana, Cuba. Her first poetry collection, Fósiles de lluvia, was published in 2022 by Betania. Her poetry has appeared in Revista, Temporales, Anthropocene, among others. She holds a PhD in Hispanic Studies and is a researcher at Trinity College Dublin. So can we have a huge round of applause, please, for Yairen?
Thank you so much. Thank you all. I'm delighted to be here among admired poets, organizers, colleagues, and friends. I'll read from Fósiles de lluvia, and I'll read first in Spanish and then in English. And I would like to thank very especially to poet Matthew Gieden, who is part of the festival, who has very generously and beautifully translated some of my poems. So thank you, Matthew, and we'll be hearing his words too tonight. Ver. Los ojos allá olvidados, sobre algún cerro o cielo, buscan a tientas lo deseado. Hierba húmeda, largas hojas amarillas, algún árbol de frutos silenciosos. Aquí también buscan las manos humedades y silencios. Mas solo hay rocas y sal. Lo definitivo del mar que emprende viajes en todas direcciones. Seeing. The forgotten eyes over there scan some hill or sky, look for what's desired. Damp grass, long yellow leaves, some silent fruit tree. Here too they seek the damp and silent haunts, but there's only rocks and salt, the definitive of the sea that travels in all directions. Espejos. Una figura se hunde en el paisaje. El agua hasta las rodillas abanica la luz sobre el cuerpo desnudo, que la oleada impulsa a una marcha indecisa. Los ojos clavados en el agua, la piel transparentada por la luz, el pez que mira desde el fondo. Mirrors. A figure sinks into the seascape. Knee-deep water reflects light all over the naked body. Ripples surge forward on an unknown path. Eyes fixed on the water. Skin translucent in the light. The fish looks on from below. Malagüero. Alguien quiere saber latitud y longitud de cada piedra. Aunque no pueda verlas, ni sentirlas en la punta de la lengua, ni impulsarlas a un vuelo sobre el agua. Si oyera hablar de la humedad blanda de los guijarros en tus plantas, giraría el mapa para arrastrarlos a otra playa o hacerlos caer de golpe sobre el cielo. Bad omen. Someone longs to know the latitude and longitude of every stone, without seeing them or tasting them on the tip of the tongue, or launching them into flight across the water. If they heard about the softness of pebbles on the soles of your feet, they would turn the map around, drag them to another beach, or slant them down into the sky. This is a beautiful translation by Matthew Gibbon. Una casa. Con esta tierra en la que ahogo las manos, podría construir una casa de losas frágiles. Durante el día la inundarían manantiales, mareas en las noches. Una casa para llevarla sobre el cuerpo y rehacerla cada tarde. Colocar la última losa en el suelo sobre el latido de las lombrices. House. With this earth in which I drown my hands, I could build a house on fragile tiles. Spring water would flood during the day, the waves wash in at night. A house to wear on the body and reconstruct every afternoon. Lay the last slab on the ground on the heartbeat of worms. Fósiles. ¿Quién podría adivinar que estas estrellas fueron lirios que el tiempo cortó? A diario alguien camina sobre flores detenidas y piensa que son granos de arena. Construye una casa, un techo con fósiles de lluvia, sin ver los círculos que prueban que una piedra es la huella de algo más. Fossils. Who would guess that these stars were lilies cut short by time? Every day someone walks on frozen flowers, believing they are grains of sand, builds a roof with fossilized rain, not noticing the circles that prove a stone is a footprint of something else. Los faros del fin del mundo. Cuando se encienden lunas en la tarde, son los puertos del fin del mundo una mañana para los barcos de La Habana, Cork y Calanans. Puede verse entonces desde cualquier punto el pino de Takekuma y adivinarse bajo la naranja flotando en el mar, la figura sumergida que respira, una versión más liviana del aire de aquí arriba. The lighthouses at the end of the world. When the moons light up in the evening, the ports at the end of the world are a mourning for the boats of Havana, Cork, and Calanans. You can be seen then from any angle, the pine of Tatecuma, and sense under the orange floating in the sea, the submerged figure breathing a lighter version of the air up here. And I will end this series of short poems, graciously translated by Matthew Gieden, and beautifully translated by him. Thank you again, Matthew, for this. With a series of haikus. Fuera, dentro. El tintineo va revelando el nombre del viejo sauce. Retando al viento, el chubasco silencia la danza de hojas. El manto de la superficie del lago desaparece. Un mango húmedo se desgaja callado sobre la tierra. En la ribera, el árbol desmayado alza los ojos. Outside, inside. The rain's tintinnabulation reveals the name of the old willow. Confronts the wind, showers, silences the dances of leaves. The cloak upon the surface of the lake disappears. A wet mango falls silent to the ground. On the riverbank, the weekend tree raises its eyes. And I'll read now a poem, first in Spanish, then in English, also translated by Matthew Gieden, from a new manuscript titled Temporales, or Made of Corals. This poem is titled Espejo. Antes de caer y hacerse un ovillo, el arrecife tiene dos caras como hoja de yagruma, envoltorio y contenido, negativo y positivo de la imagen, verde y gris. Una mirada toda pencas, cielo, alguna nube sobre una capa de plata, una mirada toda agujeros, poros, canales sobre una plancha de vidrio. Huracán también mira de lejos con su único ojo. A veces suspira, se aleja. Huracán brama, irrumpe, baila en su templo con los brazos abiertos, es ritmo y cuchillas. Las esponjas de mar licuadas espesan la danza de aletas, pólipos, partículas, se vuelven células buscándose a tientas en la ronda para recomponerse. Todos giran, laten, se montan, escupen, se tocan, transmiten, convulsionan. A jazz de caja, bombo, toms, Goliath, plato, crash, ride, hi-hat. Se parten las baquetas, se revientan las cuerdas del violín, se rompe el vidrio, hierve la plata sobre los corales. Arrancados de cuajo por el viento y las olas, los animales flotan a la deriva. Los animales flotan a la deriva, arrancados de cuajo por el viento y las olas. Se rompe el vidrio, hierve la plata sobre los corales, se parten las baquetas, se revientan las cuerdas del violín, a jazz de caja, bombo, toms, Goliath, plato, crash, ride, hi-hat. Todos giran, laten, se montan, escupen, se tocan, transmiten, convulsionan, se vuelven células buscándose a tientas en la ronda para recomponerse. Las esponjas de mar licuadas espesan la danza de aletas, pólipos, partículas. Huracán brama, irrumpe, baila en su templo con los brazos abiertos, es ritmo y cuchillas. Huracán también mira de lejos, con su único ojo. A veces suspira, se aleja. Una mirada toda agujeros, poros, canales, sobre una plancha de vidrio. Una mirada toda pencas, cielo, alguna nube sobre una capa de plata, envoltorio y contenido, negativo y positivo de la imagen, verde y gris. El arrecife tiene dos caras como hoja de yagruma antes de caer y hacerse un novillo. Mirror. Before falling and curling up, the reef is two-faced like a yagruma leaf, wrapping and what's inside, negative and positive image, green and gray. A look, all leaves, sky, some cloud on a layer of silver. A look, all holes, pores, channels on a glass plate. Hurricane watches from afar with its one eye. Sometimes sighs, walks away. Hurricane roars, bursts, dances in his temple with open arms, rhythm, blades. Liquefied sea sponges thicken the dance of fins, polyps, particles. They become cells, reaching to recompose each other in the round. All turn, beat, ride, speed, touch, transmit, convulse, to the jazz of snares, bass drum, toms, Goliath, cymbals, crash, ride, hi-hats. The drumsticks snap, violin strings break, glass shatters, silver boils over coral, uprooted by wind and waves, animal drift. Animals drift, uprooted by winds and waves, glass shatters, silver boils over coral, the drumsticks snap, violin strings break, to the jazz of snare, bass, drum, toms, Goliath, cymbals, crash, ride, hi-hats, all turn, beat, ride, speed, touch, transmit, convulse. They become cells, reaching to recompose each other in the round. Liquefied sea sponges thicken the dance of fins, polyps, particles. Hurricanes roars, bursts, dances in his temple with open arms, rhythm, blades. Hurricane watches from afar with its one eye, sometimes sighs, walks away. A look, all holes, pores, channels on a glass plate. A look, all leaves, sky, some cloud on a layer of silver. Wrapping and what's inside, negative and positive image, green and gray. The reef is two-faced, like a yagruma leaf, before falling and curling up. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Yairen. What a beautiful reading. Really, really enjoyed that, and I think everyone here did as well. So we'll move on now to our next poet, who is joining us via Zoom, is I believe in the US. So Forrest Gander was born in the Mojave Desert and has taught at both Harvard and Brown. He's the recipient of the Pulitzer Prize, Best Translated Book Award, and fellowships from the Library of Congress, Guggenheim, and US Artists Foundations. His books include Be With, the desert novel The Trace, and most recently, Your Nearness. Gander's translations include Alice Iris Red Horse, poems by Gozo Yoshimasu, and It Must Be a Misunderstanding by Carl Bracco. He also has an essay collection entitled A Faithful Existence, considering the translation, which considers translation and the relationship between science and literature. A big warm welcome, please, for Forrest Gander. Thank you.
Hi, I'm so glad to be with you. I have a view of all of you sitting in that room, and the first thing I think is, that's my company. I want to be there. So let's see. I'm going to start my reading with a note that precedes the poems in my most recent book, Your Nearness, or in the US it's called Twice Alive. What many of us learned in high school about lichen, that it's an indicator species for pollution, and litmus, in fact, is derived from lichen, and that it's the synergistic alliance of a fungus and algae or cyanobacteria is largely true, but it's simplified. If lichen ecology has more to do with collaboration than competition, it's nevertheless true that collaboration is transformative. With lichen, which may be more related to animals than plants, the original organisms are changed utterly in their compact. They can't return to what they were. And according to Anne Pringle, one of the leading contemporary mycologists, with whom I had the lucky opportunity to collaborate, it may be that lichen do not, given sufficient nutrients, age. Anne and other contemporary biologists are saying that our sense of the inevitability of death may be determined by our mammalian orientation. Perhaps some forms of life have theoretical immortality. Lichen can reproduce asexually, and when they do, bits of both partners are dispersed together to establish in a new habitat. How long can the partners of a lineage continue to reproduce? No one knows. But the thought of two things that merge, mutually altering each other, two things that intermingled and interactive become one thing that does not age, brings me to think of the nature of intimacy. Isn't it often in our most intimate relations that we come to realize that our identity, all identity, is combinatory? From Twice Alive. Mycobiont, just beginning to unwrap photobiont, each to become something else, its own life and a contested mutuality. Twice alive, algal cells swaddled in clusters. You take a three-lens jeweler's loupe to inspect the holdfast of the umbilicate lichen, then the rock tripe lichen, then the irenic amanita mushroom swarming with a kind of mite that has no anus, then the delicious chanterelles called trumpets of death. Supreme parsimony in drought lets lichen live on sporadic events of dew and fog, a velvety tomentum, and the wet thallus. I crush oak moss between finger and thumb for its sweet perfume persistent on your skin when I touch your throat, so slow to evaporate, the memory of seeing sunburst lichen on the sandstone cliff. Maculas of light falling weightless from pores in the canopy, our senses part of the wheeling life around us, and through an undergrowth stoked with the unseen go the reverberations of our steps. As we hike upward, mist holds the butterscotch taste of Jeffrey pine to the air until we reach a serpentine barren, red bud lilac and open sky, a crust of frost on low-lying clumps of manzanita. At Redwood Creek, two tandem runners cross a wooden bridge. Across the stream ahead of us, the raspy check, check, check of a scrub jay. Cardiac hills, granite boulders appear freshly sheared. Look, you say, I can see the Farallon Islands there to the south, over those long-backed hills, one behind another, a crow honks. The moon still up over Douglas firs on the climb to Rock Spring. Yellow jackets and painted lady butterflies settle on the path where some underground trickle moistens the soil. I predict you'll keep to the shade of the laurels to nibble your 3 anchovy slices over cheese sandwich while I sprawl on a boulder in full sun, sucking a pear. The frass of caterpillars tinkles onto beds of dry leaves under the oak, where a hawk alights with its retinue of raging crows. We are prey to the ache of not knowing what will be revealed as the world lunges forward to introduce itself. Clusters of tiny green dots, bitter oyster, line the black stick held in your hand. Weak trees leaning into us as if we were part of the wet dark that sustains their roots under dead leaves and that armillaria. But in the inseparable genetic mosaic of their thin root filaments, the identity of any singular species blurs among interactive populations, twice alive. The hum of some large insect immelmanning around our heads calls to mind, you tell me, the low drone of a Buddhist chant. But now we really hear chanting we can't decode. Don't be so rational. A congregate speech from the red trembling sprigs, a vascular language prior to our breathed language, corporeal, chemical, drawing our sound into its harmonic, tuning us to what we've not yet seen, the surround calling us, theoryless, toward an inference of horizontal connections, there at ground level, an incantation independent of us, but detectable, consummate, always resistant to us, but inciting our recognition of what it might mean to be here among others, human and not, here, home, where ours is another of the small voices, taking us over ourselves, over into the nothing between, the out of sight of ourselves. A litany from spore-bearing mouths as hi-fi stretch their long necks and open their throats, opening a link between systems, a super saturation of syntax, an arousal even, as slow rolling walls of high decibel sonar blow out the ears of whales, and fires burn uncontrolled, and slurry pits leak into the creek, etc., femicides, war, righteous insistence, and still the lived sensation fits into the living sensorium. Can't you hear? Don't be so rational. The world inhale. Hear the call from elsewhere, which is just where we are. No, even closer, inside us, inside the blood pulse of our bodies, the bristle of our mosses, the embrace and exhale. And the next few poems about the next two or three poems I'm going to read, I also want to read you a little note because they're connected to another trajectory of literature. So some 2,000 years ago, there was a blossoming of literature in southern India that came to be called Sangam, or convergence. One of the two styles of that literature is called Akam. It's a poetry in which personal emotion, the nuances of love, are mixed with landscape in such a way that human feeling is expressed as inseparable from the place where that feeling occurs. It was considered not only unethical, but impossible to write about human feeling as though it weren't affected by the world around and in relation to the human. Scholars of Sangam argue that the boundaries between inner and outer landscapes were considered porous, and that the ultimate goal of Sangam poetry was the dissolution of any split between self and landscape. So the five major landscapes that occur in the Sangam poems happen to be the five major landscapes of southern India are also found in California, where I live. And so I've written poems inspired by the Sangam tradition, but set here in California. Forest. erogenous zones in oaks, slung with stoles of lace lichen, the sun's rays spilling through leaves in broken packets. A force, call it nighttime, thrusts mushrooms up from their lair of spawn, mycelial loam, the whiff of port. They pop into untrammeled air with a sort of gasp that follows a fine chess move. Like memories, are they? Or punctuation? Was it something the earth said to provoke our response, tasking us to recall an evolutionary course, our long ago initiation into the one among others? And within my newborn noticing, have you popped up beside me, love? Or were you here from the start, a swarm of meaning and decay, still gripping the underworld? Both of us half buried, holding fast, if briefly, to a swelling vastness, while our coupling begins to register in the already awake compendium that offers to take us in. You take me in, and abundance floods us, floats us out. We fill each with the other. All morning breaks as birdsong over us, who rise to the surface so our faces might be sprung. And I live, one of the landscape types in southern India and in the poems of Sangam is called wasteland. I've been told there's another poem in English that has a similar title, but I'm still calling my poem Wasteland also. This is Wasteland for Santa Rosa. Santa Rosa is the town next to the one that I live in California, which has burned twice in the last 6 years because of wildfires, basically caused as a result of global warming and human interference. Wasteland for Santa Rosa. Green spring grass on the hills had cured by June, and by July, gone woolly and brown, it crackled underfoot, desiccated, while within the clamor of live oaks, an infestation of tiny larvae clung to the underleaves, feeding between veins. Their frass, that fine dandruff of excrement and boring dust, tinkled as it dropped onto dead leaves below the limbs. You could hear it 20 feet away, tinkling. Across the valley on Sugarloaf Ridge, the full moon showed up like a girl doing cartwheels. No one goes on living the life that isn't there. Below a vast column of smoke, heat, flame, and wind, I rose, swaying and tottering on my erratic vortex, extemporizing my own extreme weather, sucking up acres of scorched topsoil and spinning it outward in a burning sleet of filth and embers that catapulted me forward with my mouth open in every direction at once. So I came for you, turning the present into purgatory, because I need to turn everything to tragedy before I can see it, because it must be leavened with remorse for the feeling to rise. Another of the landscapes is the sea, is water, and I'm thinking of immigration a lot, as a lot of us are in this period of the greatest human migrations in human history, the greatest and the fastest migrations in history, and the political response to immigration. And thinking of the sea on every shore, the waves meeting every shore as immigrants that are usually welcomed. Also, I'm married now to a recent immigrant to the United States. So, immigrant C, aroused by her inaccessibility, he aches for more of her life to live inside him, watching the breakers, standing so close he can feel heat coming off her wet scalp. What is his relation to this person before him, so familiar and foreign? The way he searches out her face, he searches out himself. Gusts thrash crests of swell, spring grasses twirl circles in the sand where they stand without speaking. She wants him to know it's all charged, even grass positive, pollen negative. So when grass waves, it sweeps the air for pollen. He feels electricity all around, as though the wild drama of the coming storm were already aware of them, foreigners on this shore. Little sapphire blue flowers speckle the dunes. He wonders if he has let himself flatten out into a depthless sheet, like escalator stairs, whether in the end he'll disappear underground without the smallest lurch of resistance. But when her lavish face turns toward him, beaming, the corners of her eyes wind wet, he yields to that excess. He reappears to himself. And I'll finish with a poem from someone else. I'd love to turn you on to the Mexican poet Alfonso de Quino, who's been writing sort of eco-poetry before there was such a term. This is a poem called Fronda, and it's written in 2 columns, and it can be read either vertically, 1 column and then another, or it can be read horizontally. So it was a task to translate. I'll read the Spanish left column down, and then I'll read the whole poem vertically or horizontally in English. The one thing you need to know that you probably already know, but I'm not sure what trees you have there, but an alder is a tree that occurs in North America. Fronda. No tiene ninguna forma, la hoja en medio de las hojas. Las hojas no son el aire, sino el aire que lo ocupa. Y una copa cabe en otra, dentro de una sola hoja. Movimiento de la fronda que desvela otra rosa. Y una en otra se transforma como un cielo entre 2 hojas. Invisible rama loca se retuerce por sí sola. Si una hoja y otra hoja siempre son la misma hoja. And now in English, I'm reading both columns across. Frond, it's formless. From within the leaves I see the leaf in the middle, one brushing another of the leaves that keeps it company. Leaves aren't the alder, all the tree a leaf, but the air that holds all the alder in its sleeve, and more leaves. And trees drink each other in, and a frond emerges from one of them, tangled in the branches, a singular leaf among the leaves. Gesticulation of the frond, from within the patterns I see disclosing in the shadowed bower, another flower, the other flower. And each moves into the other, and the phylum transfluoresces like a sky, invisibly woven, and between 2 leaves opening out. Wild, invisible branch, the stalk and the corolla twisting, spirals darkening into one form and digging in. If one leaf and another leaf, from the unseen branch, always are, in the shade of those leaves, the same leaf, falling broken. That's Alfonso de Quino. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Forrest. That was great. And Anish, our truer Villa, our third poet, Catherine Foley, is a writer and former journalist with the Irish Times. Her book, Beyond the Breakwater, Memories of Home, was winner of the 2018 Waterford News and Star Green Room Award for Best New Book and was published by Mercier Press. She regularly contributes to RTE's Sunday Miscellany. Her first collection, Egmaru Mackerel, was published by Cush Came in 2019. Kushla and Costa, a collection of newspaper and radio columns, won first prize at the Oireachtas Literary Awards in 2016. And she has also scripted, presented, and co-produced a number of documentaries for TG Cahir. So can we have big bula bus, Máiste the Holly, for Catherine Foley?
First of all, it's a great, thanks, it's lovely to be here, and it's a real privilege to be invited home on us or Vehan Shaw, Garamila Mahagab, so Leme, the Gailing August Bearla, so Lanik Shiv Mela Cone of Day. I hope you'll follow. I'll read English and Irish. The first poem is, I think, the first piece I had broadcast on RTE Radio 1 on Sunday Miscellany, and it gave me great courage and encouraged me at the start of my writing career. I was writing, but this was creative, and it was a brilliant fillip of kind of, I was thrilled. I'd written other, and I had my short story published, but this was significant. So it's about memories, mostly from my childhood, in particular my grandparents' Passage East. So you have Passage West in Cork, but Passage East is in Waterford, where we go on holidays. So Passage. Their sounds are in my head today. They echo back and forth, lulling me into a half-remembered time when I was 4 and younger, in my pram outside on the footpath, looking up at Cannacanoe Hill. The breakwater, the chapel, Woodstown, Ballahack, the Hook, Crook, Duncannon, Passage East. I see Grant's house the first. Passage waited for us. The sky, streaked with lipstick, turned satin in the evening light. Moll Rook, Mrs. Bulger, Daddy Welsh, Maggie. We grew up, but their words are in my head today. Gran, Ina, Uncle Joe. Do you see the lighthouse? Mind the current. The tide's coming in. They're down on the breakwater. Sugar spilled on the linoleum. That was before we lived up at the Gap. Roger's house, Rosie's house, Patsy Barn over and back on the ferry to Ballahack, where his amputated leg was buried, and the boats on their way up the shore to Waterford had to pass between his legs ever after. The pump in front of Connor's house, the shop, ice cream. Did they get a salmon? No, they're very scarce. Crabs, gulls, stones, herrings, the smokehouse, shells, rain. Get up to bed. Rosary beads behind the cushion on Gran's chair. Mama sing-songing Gran's lines, reminding us how she had frightened them as children with her recitations in a ghostly voice. Sister Anne, is there anyone coming? No one coming, but the wind blowing, the grass growing, and 2 men on a horseback. Hurry up or we'll be late for Mass. Frocks, cardigans, sandals, ribbons, clips, lipstick, powder, the Angelus. Where are your Daddy Welsh's glasses? Where are Gran's beads? On her chair beside the fire. The wireless, the races, the Grand National, bread and butter heaped with sugar that fell onto the floor and crunched gorgeously underfoot. The men's walk, the dock, evening, the blind key, the slip, the steps, the gunnel. Why did we all get big? Why did Mirror lose her curls? There were no more prams or little cardigans with white buttons. Gran died, Daddy Welsh died. Now Joe has slipped away. We all grew up. but their words are in my head today. They echo back and forth. So my next poem, again in English, is called Praying in Prague. And I only realise now as I look back and write how central religion was to our lives when we were small. So in this poem, I was visiting Prague as an adult, and I went in search of the child of Prague that my grandmother used to call, had such devotion to it. She called it the child of Prague, in fact. But anyway, the child of Praying in Prague. When I saw the little gold statue locked behind glass, a trapdoor suddenly released, I fell down the years to my gran and passage east with her rosary beads and her devotion to the child of Prague. Right beside the statue, I saw a framed picture of the little flower, and with that another bolt came undone, and I tumbled through the tunnel of time to my Auntie Gilla and her statues and her prayers to Saint Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, and the child of Prague. Like a current, the two women and their litanies ran through me. Their big eyes, full of beseeching and pleading, took me back to then when I was a child and a statue was a focus in our lives, when it stood in a place of pride in passage on a sideboard by the stairs. And I saw my gran's lips move as she got down on her knees. And in Helvig, years later, on my aunt's bedroom window, on a doily in the sun, I recalled the saint framed by blue water all the way out to sea, with her eyes lingering there on her little doll-sized face. The statue was a presence then to my child's eyes, benign and calm. It was the pulse in a corner that directed heat into our hands. That day in Prague, a volt from the two of them, their eyes large with longing, shot back through me when I knelt on the kneeler in the little chapel in front of the golden statue of the child of Prague and the picture of the little flower. I cried for the time that was gone, when prayers were directed through a blessed prism heavenwards, when back then it was to them so clearly and an important ritual. Their joint invocation blew like a whistled breath. As I remembered them long ago, I felt their lives rush through me whispering, and I bowed my head to pray. So this next one is in Irish, and it's about memory again. It's about holy water, another religious thing, but it's about my mother really. And I think as we get older, when you've lost someone, you find yourself looking back and remembering. And so I'll read it in Irish and then in translation. My sister Roseanne, who's here, made the film to go with it. So I think Paul is lining it up. Roseanne and I worked together producing films and documentaries. And Roseanne is usually director and editor, and I'm in front. But anyway, one of the here's Ishka Koshkraha, holy water. Ishka Koshkraha. Tá mé ma labe ag dola chola istig sa dorchadas. Smuinti an le ag sheer rochalú I me chean. Closham a came harsach an dorish agus tagan si isteach. Siúlan si trasna chuam, éatram mar raincór sa bhelé. Mohíam a méra ma aig an tiisce coscrathe á chur ma éadan. Gearan si córan a crisise fláán mo craccan lena hordóg. Ihawa, a der si, agus rihin an tiisce sias in a rochaláin. Có fada le ma bhalí, fúr mar air, úr mar hrúcht madna, go dtí me ma chola. Agus mé am lí ma labe is cainlam gur dhin sin gach ihe gan tep. Ihawa, derach si, na deora beaga sin á leigeice me éadan, mar chud an searmanas tailig a chlach si gach ihe. Chur sé an roig ma bhuaí fad, agus dearthing ihawa a raislé sa le ditting ma chola. An bhfuil marc fácha ag an isce sin me éadan granta. I'll wait till the English starts, and it's called Holy Water. Has it started? No? My raw hopping. So Holy Water. I'm in my bed going asleep in the dark. The thoughts of the day are swirling around in my head. I hear her step on the threshold and she comes in. She walks across to me, light like a ballet dancer. I feel her fingers on my face, putting the holy water on my forehead. With her thumb, she puts the mark of the cross on my brow. Good night, she says, Iwa. And the water trickles down in a stream to my eyebrows, cold like ice, fresh like morning dew, until I fall asleep. As I lie here in my bed, I remember that she did that every night without fail. Good night, she used to say, Iwa, putting the little drops on my forehead as part of the familial ritual that she followed every night. All my worries used to vanish, and I used to say good night back to her before I fell asleep. Is the mark of that holy water on my forehead engraved there? So that's that. Too fast for it. There are míle maithagir an chéad ceann eile is ansalom gomóra is brála me an kittel mar an scanán hiasar an tráig I mailean an gáil agus bhí sé cósaí múla nó the VRI Forrest and so so interesting what he was saying about how place and self are the porous connection. You know, it's when you live in a beautiful place as I do in Peninsula na Déise, Gaeltacht na Néise, you can't help but inspire, you know, the sea on one side, the bay on the other, so the water and the light. So this this is a lot of my work is about that, trying to talk about that and record all of that. But this is an kittel. Okay, away lad. An kittel. Scáhanna fada ag sína I dro bon na spéire, an tíd a tráite, fuacht na híthe ag teannaling. Balíon a bháthar clocha, trohíonn sí curcail. Líonann sí le créabhóga agus cuireann sí an kittel ina hí an os sin. A hóil dúbhdóite ag cothramú go ciotach ann, go corachónach mar asal. Agus amach ó churcail fohanna na glocha lia, agus in aineón na lóina, tosíonn lasracha ag reincha sa bheogan. Téal maithir chun a hille batí áil van tinne. Táimid sáite ag maireacht an bhrothal, go mer an agla bharmh graim oring, nach meróig an tuisce, go na meoig an tinne, go néalóig an lá, agus ghuiil blas na gréine as Cuba ón ar grachan. It's about picnics we used to have as children on Geneva Barracks, now the barracks strand underneath it in County Waterford. I think it's mostly about children, the world of children. The kettle, long shadows stretching away towards the horizon. The tide gone out. The chill of the night moving in. My mother gathers stones and makes a circle. She fills it with twigs and puts the kettle on this. It sits giddily like a donkey, its black arse wobbling, and out from that sheltered circle of grey stones, and in spite of the breeze, the flames start to dance in the gust. My father goes to gather more sticks for the fire. We are tight together in the joy of the heat, until a deathly fear takes a grip of us, that the water won't boil, that the fire will go out, that the day will disappear and the heat of the sun is disappearing from our skins. So the next one, Shanna Kittle. father. Anyway. So this next piece, it's set in Cork, and that's why I chose it. It's called Boarding School. It's from my memoir, Beyond the Breakwater, and the book is a collection of stories which I had written over the years for the radio programme on RTE Radio 1 Sunday Miscellany. So I sent the collection of pieces off to Mercier Press in Cork, and they published it in 2019 or 2018. So mostly Sunday Miscellany programme goes out on the radio in the morning, Sunday morning, and it features stories of poems that are personal. So I hope you like this. It's one of the pieces set in Cork, because I studied in Cork, but this is one of the first ones, and I hope you like it. I wasn't sure. I was thinking I could have read Nuns, another chapter, because we're here in Annonagel Place, so I thought. But anyway, I chose Boarding School. So it's about 5 minutes long. It was my aunts who took me to Cork to have me fitted out in a brown gym slip for boarding school in Ardfoyle on the banks of the Lee. They paid for the blazer with the school crest on it too. They judged the effect, turning me around to study the cut of the uniform on my little 12-year-old frame. They tightened the sash and fixed the pleats, and I felt like an experiment as they lavished me with the best of everything, even treating me to tea in the Walter Raleigh Hotel in Youghal on our way home. I arrived home laden down with a great pile of parcels and bags. Of course, my younger sisters were green with envy as I paraded around in my new uniform and gabardine coat, all belted up in the brown ensemble. I tightened the buckle, placed the school beret at a jaunty angle atop my head, and swaggered around like Marlene Dietrich playing Mata Hari. As I counted the days until I'd be driven to my new school some 60 miles away, I sewed special name tags onto everything. A new pair of sheets, 2 new linen napkins, 2 new blankets, a Foxford rug, and a little grey game skirt with a swish that I could easily see myself wearing when I went out with my first ever hockey stick onto the playing pitch. I'd be saying goodbye to the rough and tumble of camogie matches in the Gaeltacht. It would be a life of hockey games, sports mistresses, and midnight feasts, just like in Enid Blyton's Mallory Towers or St. Clair's. I started thinking about tuck boxes, and I wondered if they'd have a sports hall, a belfry, or a matron for when I was sent to the infirmary. My initials were carved into my own cutlery set, and I got a heavy silver table ring for my 2 new linen napkins. And Auntie Sheila gave me a great American suitcase with fading labels pasted on its side, mementos of her exotic honeymoon cruise to New York and other trips to Corfu and Rome. As I packed the case with 4 new vests, 8 pants, half a dozen brown knee socks, the school tie, my new dressing gown, slippers, and a toilet bag, I felt my own journey to faraway Cork and the boarding school was well on a par with such travels. My life would be spectacular, worth writing about in a novel, like the life of Jane Eyre, the Little Madeline, or Anne of Green Gables. And in the end, it was as good as any Enid Blyton novel. We had Miss Fiona Walton for English, Mr. O'Driscoll for history, tobogganing during the snow, and a head girl to lead us in grace before meals. I woke every morning to the sound of bells being rung up and down the dormitory aisles. After breakfast, we'd shiver on the avenue walk to our classrooms. The ice and the gravel cracked underfoot in the eerie stillness of the morning. At night, we'd gather in the refectory, deafening ourselves as we dragged our 200 stools from under the tables to sit as one for dinner. Still, nothing could compare with being home for Christmas. I sat at the kitchen table, watching my mother shake the flour loose and kneading the dough as she made brown bread. A knot in my stomach as I felt the days slip away. I tiptoed around in case it was a dream. My sisters, in turn, tiptoed around me. In a way, I was like a stranger in their midst. All too quickly, the Christmas holidays were over and I was back at school again, suspended in that strange school universe, adrift at night in a sea of echoing silence. By the start of the second term, I knew all too well the daily rituals of boarding school, as well as the longing, loneliness, and wishing that went with it. at bedtime in my little cubicle, even as I tried to damp down the waves of homesickness, a terrible tide of longing would sweep me along. The only relief for homesickness came on Sunday afternoons at exactly 3 o'clock, when I would stand on the convent landing and focus all my attention on the public payphone. Its sudden explosion into life was terrifying, but I'd pick up the receiver and hear my mother's voice. Then a tightness would grip my chest and I'd lose the ability to speak at first, but as tears streamed out of my eyes, I would give vent to the great river of loss that my 12-year-old self could hardly understand. So, that one. So, an seo an ceann, an Catalonia and Ireland are from this Igmaru Macharel, which Cushcane brought out in 2019. It's out of print now, but Igmaru Macharel means killing mackerel, and that's how a neighbour of ours in Ring described what her father did for a living when she gave an interview once. Fiach sé Igmaru Macharel, that he was out fishing, killing mackerel, and I thought it was such a brilliant description of the quotidian, you know, what the daily toil, what we toil, as we all have. So we're all Igmaru Macharel, so I chose it as a title for my poems, which are really about my life, the passage of time and memory. So as I said, I'm living in the Gaeltacht. A lot of the time I sit at my desk, look out at the day, and I try to write. So my next and final poem is I'm Sure, Weather, and it's short. I read it first in Irish. It's about the seasons roll round, and again, Roseanne made this short film to accompany it. I hope you both like it. So I'm Sure. Nuair a thosnaíonn an airing dúntar na fuinneoga agus bailítear na héadaí ón líne. Blaistar drúcht cracan nuair a aon an siúc graim bmhóithre tuaithe. Ardítar clúasa nuair a chéadan an gaoch chun liganta rudaí nach bhfuil ceangailte I gceart imeacht. Nuair a hagan an spéirling, tugtar airt an nuacht, agus in Peter mar a hána na blianta hin bhain déhan a bhlachas sin a uascailt ón duine. Agus tas na gréine ag spalpa a nós, cloistar gochan an líne a bhar fadó ag gáire coscúin. I'm too fast, roll hopping. Must work on that. So, I'm sure the weather or time. When the rain starts, the windows are shut and the clothes are taken in off the line. You can feel the dew on your skin when the frost takes a grip of country roads. Ears are pricked when the wind blows, leaving things that aren't tied down fly away. When the storm comes, the news is heeded and pleas are made as they were in times past to the goddesses of the heavens to save us from the bad weather. With the heat of the sun belting down, the voices of those who lived long ago can be heard, laughing by the sea wall.
So we're now going to have a little Q&A session. So if Catherine and Yairen could join me up here with the chairs. But it's been a fabulous, fabulous evening, and okay, I'm going to sit in the middle. I think I'm going to be given a mic. No? Yeah. Let's get into it. So I think the first question I'd like to ask is if you maybe just very practical one, describe your writing routine. Like, is it something you do evenings and mornings, all day? Like, you know. So, Johnny, you wanna?
Okay. Well, my writing, I sit at my desk every day, kind of from 9 to 5 o'clock in the evening, but we do a mix of things. We do radio programs, we do little things for social media, for TG Carr. So and sometimes I'm in a low, I'm not very productive at the moment. I find I just haven't been doing anything for a while, but I'm still sitting. And so it's like that. Some day, and I get a great buzz when I do write something, and I'm delighted, but I haven't done something for a while. And it just happens, I suppose, as a writer. You can't have energy, be creative all the time, but I feel bad about it, but I just have to write it out. So, but anyway, 9 until 5 every day, and we take a break for lunch, and we go for a walk at lunch, and then I come back, and that's it. I got a few bursaries to write stuff in Irish. That was a great incentive. It's hard, you know, you're looking at your screen and you're not, but when you have energy, when you're positive, when you're upbeat, that's when it's great. But I have to be honest, it's hard now when you're...
I suppose it can be a bit like an artist bringing out an album, you know, they tour with that for a while, and then something new will come along.
Maybe it's the lull after bringing out an album.
Yes, I would say I write mainly in the mornings because in the afternoons there's nothing left, so I can't. I would love to be more bohemian, like write in the nights. The cigarettes, I don't smoke them, but I like the idea of the bohemian writer and the bohemian poet. I'm not that type yet. And lately, that's been a challenge too. It's been challenging. I think that maybe we should challenge ourselves if it doesn't happen. If that day we cannot block that half an hour, or hour in the morning to do it because life gets in the way. But yeah, I try. I don't know, maybe you've noticed that I'm about to lose my voice because I lecture and teach. I started coughing a while ago. And that's something that gets in the way sometimes too. The fact that when I'm not with people, I spend a lot of time in front of the computer. So something I do that helps me write is to get away from the computer and take a pen and a piece of paper and a notebook. And that's the healthiest approach I've found for myself to writing, whenever it's possible. And always carry a little notebook, because you never know.
Yeah.
And Forrest, would you like to weigh in?
I think he's on mute. He's on mute. Tell me he's on mute, please.
Oh, Forrest, you're on mute.
Okay, got it. So I heard both of the answers, which give me an idea of what the question was, but I missed the question. Was it about when do you write?
Yes.
Yeah, your writing routine.
Yeah. And for me, I don't know when I write. I used to be much more regular about waking up really early and beginning writing. Now I think I carry things in my head longer, and I take notes wherever I am. And then when I have extended periods of sitting at my desk, which I don't seem to have many of, I look at those notes and think about what I've been carrying with me and working on in my head. And that's when I write. But mornings are a better time for me than evenings.
Jim, if you're talking to Forrest, you might talk in closer to this orange microphone.
Got
That's
it.
the digital
This one?
microphone.
Okay.
Do you want to bring it around to you?
Yeah.
No, please don't.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Let's not move it, just in case.
It's okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Forrest. I suppose I kind of want to touch on that question around around writer's block and stuff. So, is it what do you do to kind of get around it, or I don't know, face it, or whatnot?
Sorry, Jim.
Yes.
Could you repeat that into this microphone by standing up here?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question I was asking was about writer's block. So basically, how would you go about, overcoming it or dealing with it and whatnot?
Okay.
Well, I just think I have to write it out, just hanging in there and wait, and there's nothing else, and just be good to myself and try to, and paint as well. And I haven't painted for about 6 months, so I don't know why, I'm just a little bit, just have to give yourself time to recover. And, all of these things are outpourings, they're all connected to the psyche, your physical, emotional, psychological, they're all linked in. And I think you just have to allow yourself lift again. I don't know, is there anything else? I'm trying to be nice to yourself and be good and be patient, I would think.
Yes, and thank you, Catherine, for that answer, and thank you for the question. I don't think much about writer's block. I write essays too, and I know that sometimes I'm not as productive as I would like to, maybe. But I think that even if we are not putting things on paper, the writer, a poet in particular, I would say, is always writing. Sometimes we write when we go for a walk, and images come to our head, and things are happening. So I don't even know if writer's block exists. I'm not sure. That doesn't mean that I write all the time, but I would be wary of naming writer's block and giving that importance can be a little bit maybe an extra pressure we don't need, maybe.
Yeah. Love that answer, thank you. And finally, Forrest?
Estoy de acuerdo contigo. For me, I'm often not writing. The secret, it said, is a two-part secret to writer's block. Wine, coffee, wine, coffee, wine, coffee. Also, I read a lot of translation, and and works in Spanish, which I can read in the original, often open up to me different kinds of paths and possibilities and syntactical trajectories that inspire me to approach writing from a new direction than something that I feel I might be stuck in.
Good answer.
Good answer. Okay. Well, I think that takes us to the end of our evening. So I'd like to end by getting a big round of applause, first of all, for Yairen Jerez Columbié. And our poet, Forrest Gander. And finally, for Catherine Foley. I think that you all have books over in the table over here. Okay, brilliant. So available at the table and for Forrest as well. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone for coming. Oh, see you all at 9 o'clock. Yeah, for the next session. Thank you.
What's your name?
Jim Tickers.
Oh, Jim, thanks very much. Lovely, thank you.